Okay, let's welcome Team SolarMAX.
Welcome to a world without comprehensive understanding of the nature of the sun and the dangers of space weather. A world without detailed implementable solutions to the threats of severe solar storms. And the world where the public, policymakers, and industry leaders are unaware of the perils of space weather. This is the world without Team SolarMAX. Here, a massive solar storm struck the Earth on Thursday, January 18th, 2018. This storm was classified as an extreme solar event, with auroras extending to low latitudes and visible in cities as close to the equator as Miami, Shanghai, and Johannesburg. The storm has had significant impacts on ground infrastructure all around the globe, as well as on satellites and human space missions. Feelings of fear are reported all around the world, raising the concern of the United Countries about possible political troubles in many nations. A press conference is being held 48 hours after the solar event at the United Countries Office for Outer Space Affairs in Vienna to provide the world with an overview of the consequences. Experts who were present for a dedicated space weather seminar are still in Vienna, and many of them were invited to contribute to the press conference. Sir Rupert Paxton, the Secretary General of the United Countries, is about to begin his introductory statement.
We need to know.
Ladies and gentlemen, this emergency press conference has been called to address questions relating to the current crisis. We've assembled a panel of experts who will take your queries after I have made a brief statement. 48 hours ago, our planet was struck by a solar storm, which we are classifying as an extreme event. This severely affected electrical infrastructure and left billions of citizens in many countries without power. Even worse, many people have been injured, and there are reports that hundreds have been killed. Our condolences go out to the families of those victims. Now, I know this is a worrying time for us all, but I urge you to remain calm. Power is being returned to the majority of populations. The advice is to stay at home if you are in one of the affected areas, and make sure you ration food and water if necessary. We have all been affected by this natural disaster, but none more so than the eastern seaboard of North America, where electric grid systems failed under the strain of the storm. Unfortunately, we have no current estimates for for when power will return to homes. Despite predictions of good weather, a sudden severe blizzard has struck the area, hampering recovery efforts. At this time, it appears there may be a correlation between events. I have been in contact with the leaders of these countries and their representatives here in Europe who are coordinating their nations' respective disaster management efforts. Our thoughts are with our colleagues currently in the headquarters in New York and our office in Montreal. Accurate information and communications are critical in the first hours of response, but this has been hindered by the loss of satellites and power to the ground. Transport systems are still experiencing disruption problems. A few airports in North America still remain closed, and the transport of food and supplies into towns and cities remains slow. Harsh snow conditions are further delaying response efforts in the affected areas. A serious and sudden event of this scale needs extraordinary efforts to cope with it, so the resources of the United Countries are at the disposal of those who need it. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the World Health Organization, and the World Food Programme are working together with the Red Cross to make sure the right aid and tools get to the right people in place and at the right time. But please, help each other. Donate to organizations, and please do not hinder the emergency services where possible, as they are overstretched. National grids, satellites, and personal electronic items are vulnerable and have felt the effects of recent events. Since our modern society relies heavily on these, a storm of this magnitude today has had a greater impact on our communities than at any time in our history. We have seen a breakdown in the relationship between us and our environment. This has been a wake-up call, both to the fact that our sun isn't always a perfect neighbour, and to the reality that we were not prepared for a solar event of this magnitude. We don't yet know the full extent of the damage from the solar storm, and we won't know until after the crisis is over what economic losses have occurred. But the costs are estimated to be in the billions of dollars. We all face a long road of recovery and rebuilding ahead. But you are not alone. We will work together, and next time we will ensure we are prepared. Thank you.
Question, please.
Now, before I open up to the press, I'd like to invite Dr. Kumar over here, who is a leading expert on solar physics from the Indian Space Research Organisation, to provide some more background information on the event that took place. Dr. Kumar?
Thank you, Secretary General, and good morning to the ladies and gentlemen. I'll try to divide my presentation into two parts. Initially, I'll try to explain the phenomena and the different scales of the storms. And the later part of it, I'll try to give a brief knowledge of the our understanding and future course of action, what we are thinking of that. You may know that the sun is a collection of very hot ionized gas, what is called a plasma, and it is under the influence of severe, strong magnetic field and its own gravitation that drives its all dynamics. At the core, it is nothing but a nuclear furnace burning the hydrogens into heliums, and in this process, it is generating a lot of energy, and that energy comes out through the process of convection and then radiation and reach our Earth or universe. Now, while interacting the magnetic field and with the charged plasma, sometimes what happens, some of the energetic radiations in the forms of gamma rays, it comes out. Sometimes very large amount of charged particles, mass may be as high as the mass of the Earth itself, comes out and thrown out. That is called the coronal mass ejection, or CME. These CMEs are then blown out through the solar wind. They interact with intergalactic magnetic fields and sometimes reaches the Earth. Our Earth is also having a magnetic field that try to deflect these CMEs. It is sometimes successful to deflect some of the CMEs with lesser strength, but in case of a big storms, it doesn't succeed. Some of them they penetrate, and the very large ionized particles that struck the electronics, sometimes it destroys the satellite partially or fully, totally. The distorted geomagnetic field, it induces geomagnetic currents in our long-haul power grids, pipelines, and railway tracks, causing a destruction. So, as in the case of our earthquakes or tornadoes, we also classify these storms into different scales. They are classified in the scales of G1 to G5 and the next in their increasing order of strength. As you can see here, the current storms, what we have experienced, it's a class of G5, so it is having a lot of destructive powers. Our Earth has not experienced any X class of storms since 1859 Carrington event, and we hope that it doesn't happen, because as on today we are dependent on very much on electronic equipment, so it will be a very catastrophe if that sort of storms hit us now. So we expect that doesn't happen. But we have to understand some of the things. What are those things? We have to understand the basic interaction of the sun with its magnetic field. We have to understand the CME, the ejection of flares, and the path they travel or the path they follow. In that process, we have to have very good observation, preferably from the space-based stations, and complemented by ground-based observation, as I have put into this flowchart. Then we have to interpret those observations with respect to heliospheric and magneto-hydrodynamics interactions. We have to generate a model out of it. We have to correct the model by better observations or and compare those model output with the previous observations. And so we have to do this in an iterative process. At present, we are in this particular loop, so we are still improving our processes, so we are not able to predict our solar weather, solar events very accurately. So we are working on this particular loop, and we are working with Dr. Salazar to improve our space-based observations such that we can improve our predictions in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Now, I know you've got many questions, so yes, we'll take a question from the press. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Chen Xuyuan from China News. What are the effects on the populations in New York? And how are you going to deal with water and food supply? Thank you.
Yes, this is a very important question, and our expert, Dr. Martel, who's a researcher in societal impacts, will address your question.
Good morning. As a specialist on weather events and its consequences on social levels, I alerted the authorities on this, and I deplore that no disaster management plan has been done until now, especially for the sick and elderly, the most affected ones. The situation in New York, one of the most impacted cities, corresponds to my study's outputs. Even worse, as there is no electricity in most homes. Without electricity, many critical services become unavailable. And for example, water pumps, heatings, and refrigerators stop working. Therefore, there can be problems with food and water supply. In addition, people experience discomfort, anxiety, and health problems due to sewage backup and shortage of medical care. As predicted, food and water lack of supply has indeed started creating panics and riots. The US President has declared a state of emergency. The only thing to do now is to coordinate our experts' knowledge with the United Countries to deploy an emergency plan from now on. We are hoping to get electricity back within 1 week, but if we don't, it can be even worse.
Thank you, Dr. Martel. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just received a field report from Tokyo, which has also been seriously affected. Can we watch this testimonial, please?
日本全国での大規模停電が続いています。 政府は自衛隊と電力会社のエンジニアを派遣し、作業員の徹夜の作業により現在までに 10% が復旧。依然多くの病院、交通機関、商業施設は非常用電源に依存しています。福島原子力発電所の教訓から原子力発電所は速やかにバックアップ電源に切り替わり、緊急停止措置が取られ、運休中の火力発電所が稼働を開始しました。政府は国民に節電を呼びかけました。鉄道交通網は本数を減らしての運用となり、多くの新幹線は運休されています。ここ東京駅では新幹線の復旧を待つ人で駅構内は混乱しています。夜には気温が0度 C になることが予想され、 JR 東日本は毛布と水の配布を開始しました。ガソリンの確保のために多くの人がガソリンスタンドに書き込み、交通渋滞が発生しています。警察は緊急車両の通行を確保するために自動車の使用停止を呼びかけています。成田空港では日本航空の航空機が着陸に失敗し、乗客200人が死亡。現在航空機の運航は停止中です。事故調査チームは今回の事故が管制ミスによるものか、それとも大規模停電によるものか、原因の調査を進めています。
Let's resume the questions from the press.
Mr. Fax.
Madam.
Morning, Anja Schuster from Der Spiegel. My question goes to Dr. Salazar from NASA. Dr. Salazar, as far as I know, NASA has sent several scientific probes into the inner and outer solar system since the beginning of space exploration. How come that none of the spacecrafts were used as forecasting tools in order to prevent this to happen? Thank you.
Sure, good morning. Well, as Dr. Kumar mentioned, you know, space weather is a very complicated phenomenon, and there's still a lot of knowledge gaps we are trying to fill. NASA's twin stereo probes and the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, which is a joint project with ESA, monitored the CME from the very beginning. The source was the giant sunspot AR6756, which is a nest of tangled magnetic activity more than 50 times wider than Earth itself. The sunspot magnetic field erupted, producing an S-class solar flare and hurling 1 billion tons of electrified plasma towards our planet. NOAA and NASA analysts were able to track the CME and predict its arrival time of 2 days to cross the 96 million miles. However, we failed at predicting its appearance earlier, and moreover, its magnitude, or geoeffectiveness in scientific terms, which unfortunately was way bigger than expected. So in the light of the limited number of scientific probes we have out there, and their age, and the budget costs and sequestration that's been applied to NASA in the last years, NASA Mission Directorate is working very hard, especially in the last 48 hours, with other space agencies like ESA for enhancing our current forecasting, modeling, and preventing capabilities. This includes data mining with Kepler and other probes, and also we're evaluating many proposals for affordable, innovative, and missions that we can deal with to close this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salazar. Yes, the next question, please. Sir?
Timo Nikkanen from The Economist. We heard that Montreal has been without power for 48 hours, and people are starting to die from cold. What are the power utilities doing? And why didn't we learn anything from the 1989 disaster in Quebec?
Thank you for your question. You're referring to the events of 1989 in Quebec. At that time, we were unprepared, and on the 13th of March, coronal mass ejection hit the Earth. And this created geomagnetically induced currents in the power lines. This eventually brought down transformers, caused massive problems, blackouts, trapped people in buildings. It was, it's this particular event, although large, was not as large as a Carrington event, for example, of 1859. But if we move back to the current crisis, though, Jim Rosenkrantz on our panel here who is from the power industry, will answer your question. Jim.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I'm Jim Rosenkrantz, and I'm here representing the Association of Electrical Distributors. On behalf of our constituent companies, we would like to inform our customers that we're working around the clock to restore power in affected areas. Unfortunately, hundreds of millions of dollars of permanent damage has been inflicted on our distribution grid equipment from this magnetic storm. As my colleague Dr. Kumar noted, the ground-induced currents have a powerful impact on our long-haul transmission lines, causing damage and invoking safety shutdowns in our equipment. Similarly, electromagnetically induced currents in our heavy transformers cause permanent internal damage with a storm of this size. The industry has made several improvements over the last 20 years, such as installing shunting equipment, implementing changes to our long-haul energy policy procedures in order to reduce this risk. However, it is true that we were not prepared for an event of this magnitude. Despite our nearly constant cries for change, our aging infrastructure has never been officially designated as critical, and we didn't receive the appropriations we were hoping for from our government partners. What we are now seeing are the costs of this collective ignorance: millions of dollars in daily losses, and a projected overall loss from this storm alone in the billions. Nonetheless, we remain committed to restoring utilities in the months to come. We in the industry would like to continue to remind the public and our fellow stakeholders here at the table that you only miss us when we're gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenkrantz. Yes, another question?
Yes, actually, I do.
Yes, madam.
Why didn't governments do anything to prevent this?
Madam, I understand your concern, and we have a member of parliament from Quebec here with us today.
Good morning. I understand your anger. Canada have had a dreadful experience of geomagnetic storm that occurred in 1989, as mentioned before. We went through a huge blackout. From this experience, we, the member of Canadian Parliament, decided to take action so that we could say never again. We spent a lot of energy to look avidly for support all over the world. In the early 2000s, I was already an MP, and I and my colleagues tried to find support abroad, and we met foreign MPs. However, we face several challenges, and especially opposition from coalitions. It was impossible to find a reasonable compromise because of economic issues. Despite our strategic position in the governmental systems, policymakers adopted a laissez-faire approach. Almost nothing was done to protect our satellite, power grid, and above all, our population. This is our duty, though. So I can say that coalitions that minimize our warning are responsible for the situation we are facing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. LaRose. While we're speaking of Canada, thank you. Thanks again. Yes, we've now received a field report from Montreal. Can we play that now? Thanks.
Bonsoir, ici Mike Wazowski pour Radio-Canada. Je suis au refuge d'urgence de l'hôpital général de Montréal. Des milliers de personnes sont ici. En santé grâce au générateur d'urgence, mais le froid commence à être très intense. Nous ne savons pas combien de temps nous avons ici. Les gens ont peur de ne jamais revoir leur famille et leurs amis. Ici, au refuge de l'espoir, les survivants patientent.
Yes, the next question, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gabriele Brandi from the Financial Times. What are the exact consequences of the failure of the satellite services? Thank you.
Due to our heavy reliance on satellite networks, their loss has wide-ranging implications. We have Dr. Starshoot here from the satellite industry who will feed your question. Dr. Starshoot?
Good morning. On behalf of the World Satellite Association, here is the information I am able to communicate to you at the moment. First, you should know that our members have been accustomed for several years to cope with service outages due to solar events, but this one was several orders of magnitude more severe than usual, causing massive electrostatic discharges on board and probably a lot of single event upsets on the satellite electronics. And operators are still currently trying to get signal back from satellites. First, to make sure that their spacecrafts have kept their orbital positions, and then to control their subsystems. As all of you can experience at the moment, communications are still interrupted to a wide scale, with significant impact on the level of service supplied to our customers. Many of them were faced with power outages impacting their ground stations, and restoring operations have been delayed for several hours after the storm. Power is still not available in many control centers. Wherever power supply has already been restored, communication networks starting being worked out, as well as positioning, navigation and timing services. Our members highlight, however, that you should be aware that commercial services are not their first target, as many governments ask for focusing efforts on those that directly contribute to search and rescue operations, and that you should be prepared for continuing perturbation in the upcoming weeks. Restoring services is a matter of a few months, and our members' teams are working incredibly hard on that topic at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Starshoot. The next question, please. Madam.
Yeah, good morning. Chun Hui Wang from Space News. Mr. Dale, what about the astronaut about the Inspiration Mars? Are they okay? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. As you know, several weeks ago, we at Inspiration Mars launched our 500-day mission, the flyby mission around Mars with our two astronauts, Chris Hadmeadow and Hirohito Sanada on board. At their trajectory, they were directly in the path of the event that has so affected us here on Earth. 48 hours ago, we lost contact with our crew at about the time they would have been impacted. And I know there have been rumors about what has happened to our astronauts, but we've just crunched the numbers a few hours ago. And I've been authorized to report the following. The communications antenna on board was destroyed instantly, but we believe the spacecraft is intact and life support systems are still functional. Our medical group are confident that both of our astronauts are still alive. However, it is with a heavy heart that I report the following. With the acute radiation dosage they've received, we believe that without significant medical intervention, both Chris and Hirohito will die in the coming 5 to 10 weeks. Unfortunately, we are not able to communicate the severity of the situation to them, and it is not possible to alter their trajectory for a quick return. I want to say something to the children of the world that have been following our astronauts so closely. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It is all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It is all part of taking a chance and expanding humanity's horizon. The future does not belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. Though significant efforts were put into the active radiation shielding, the technologies we have capable of protecting against such an event are too heavy to launch and consume too much power. We at Inspiration Mars hope that the magnitude of this tragic situation does not drive governments and space agencies away from pushing forward their efforts in human spaceflight. We hope that the bridges that have been built between the private and public sectors are not washed away. Mankind is led into the darkness beyond our world by the inspiration of discovery and the longing to understand. Our journey into space will go on. Chris and Hirohito knew the dangers they have faced and have taken them on willingly. They will be immortalized for their courage. We're trying everything in our power to regain contact with our astronauts. Chris, Hirohito, our hearts are with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to inform you that the G5 solar storm that struck Earth 2 days ago was only a forerunner for the huge solar storm that is about to hit us. Can I ask everyone to please remain calm? Ladies and gentlemen, please don't panic. Stay in your seats and remain calm. Remain calm.
Solar magnetic storm had a bit of an unwanted side effect.
The effects of the solar storm have just hit Earth. It's just another day at the office in Leiden in the Netherlands. As I'm about to pack my bag, the lights suddenly go out. This is unusual. Oh well, I'm sure the power will come back on any minute now. I just head towards my bike and cycle home. Although, it does remind me of something I heard on the news a few minutes ago about power outages.
I was eating breakfast with my family in Lagos, Nigeria, when the power suddenly went out. But I'm used to power outages, and I don't think this one is any different. I turn on the diesel generator and get the power back up and running.
This is Xi'an, China. I'm the teacher working at a school. Just now, TV signals went bad all of a sudden, and the same happened with my cell phone.
1 hour later. I can't believe the power is still not on. I'm definitely starting to get a little worried. I wish I could switch on the TV to see what's going on, but all the networks seem to be down. What is this? Actually, I really don't care about the details. All I want is for the heating in our house to work again.
I travel to my office by car as usual. I take out my mobile phone to make a call, but there isn't any signal. Has something happened at the phone company? I'm starting to get worried by the power and mobile outage. Is this more than just a coincidence? I get to work and find the backup diesel generator running there too.
I tried to contact China Telecom, but failed. Factually, I can't contact anyone. I don't know why. I'm deeply worried.
1 day later. A whole day has passed without any form of communications or power. No one seems to know what's going on. Thinking of my father, I really hope the hospitals have extra power generators. Overnight, many cars, including ours, got stolen, so there's no way for me to reach him. We're trying to stay calm, but everywhere around us, people are really starting to panic.
I'm still using the diesel generator at home. I'm starting to wonder when the power will be back up and running. I don't have much more fuel left, and my mobile phone still has no connection. What's going on?
Still no communication from our world. Is the end of the world coming? How terrible. I miss my brother in USA very much.
1 week later. Our food stock only lasted 3 days, and by the time we made it out of the house, most supermarkets had been raided. Even the police gave up trying to maintain order and joined the raids. Why is no one doing anything? And for goodness sake, why is there still no power? I hope my husband will be back soon with some food.
I'm really starting to get afraid now. This blackout is unusual. My mobile phone still has no connection. I finally got the information that the Nigerian government announced the power outage this week was caused by solar weather, and blackouts occurred across the world. I have never heard of solar weather before, and I'm very scared about the situation I find myself in. My family is relying on diesel, but starting to run out.
We got some bad news from radio. The extreme disaster caused by space weather happened. Widespread power, goods blackout around the world. Communication systems are totally destroyed. I am shocked indeed. I can never imagine that.
1 month later. We've been moved to a refugee camp nearby. We had to leave everything behind, but at least we're together. Every day I walk over to the casualties list, and every day I see more and more friends and family on the list. My father never made it out of the hospital. Living conditions at the camp are awful, and it's really taking its toll. My youngest daughter is sick, just like more than half the people here. When will someone bring some medicine?
People fight and steal products from the market every day. The police and army are starting to lose control, and the Nigerian government is about to set a nationwide state of emergency. I'm getting very scared.
Luckily, China is not the worst caused by the disaster. Now we are recovering. To help those most affected areas, China dispatched rescue teams and is providing assistance. Our family donated some money for victims.
1 year after the solar storm hit Earth, gradually civilization is being built up again in Europe. Although it's like living in the Middle Ages again, at least some order has been restored. We couldn't have done it without help from foreign organizations, and I feel very thankful for that. But I still miss my father and my daughter every single day.
The situation here isn't much better. Some improvements were made, but the power grid is still crippled, and most people have no permanent electricity supply. Most of the electricity is provided by personal diesel generators. Power is only available for a few hours a day if we're lucky. I can't afford much diesel because the price has risen so high. I find it hard to get enough food to feed my family, and it seems like this problem will never end. I really don't know what the future will hold.
Chinese assistance continues. Now, we concern more about space weather. Some constellations have been launched into space to survey solar physics with international cooperation. You know, the space disaster is globally destructive. We should work together for it. Yes, we should.
This is the world as we know it. These gaps in our knowledge and preparedness are real, and they are this disturbing, and addressing them was the challenge of TP SolarMAX. So what would happen in a future scenario where Team SolarMAX does exist? The solar storm will still occur, but the recommendations expressed by Team SolarMAX have been taken into account by the various targets of their awareness campaign in 2014 and 15. This is a world where the recommendations of increasing the resilience of our electricity grids through the application of smart grid technology, of improving our ability to observe and predict solar events through a new mission involving a constellation of microsatellites, of improving how our spacecraft habitats are designed in order to best shield our astronauts from solar radiation, are all taken into account by the heads of electricity distribution companies, the space agencies and the satellite operators, and the designers of interplanetary missions. A world where the members of SolarMAX took their report back to their countries and advocated for these issues, where they took the materials, gained funding, and conducted these targets and public awareness campaigns in order to bring about this change. It is in this future that a press conference is held in the middle of the January 2018 annual seminar held at the United Countries International Space Weather Agency in Vienna. Sir Rupert Paxton, the Secretary General of United Countries, is about to begin his introductory statement.
Recalculating. Good morning. Your Excellencies, government representatives, members of the press, online viewers, and those following on social media sites. The United Countries is honoured to host this International Space Weather Agency meeting today in order to update you on the ongoing global space weather awareness campaign. Started in 2013 at the International Space University by Team SolarMAX, this awareness campaign first took hold among European citizens and then quickly spread across the planet, thanks in part to the international and intercultural ethos of the team. Today, we are pleased to welcome a representative from ISU, Gary Martin, to join us. Thank you. But before we start this morning's proceedings, I would like to comment on two things. First, there is no need for alarm. However, we are expecting the effects of another large solar storm to reach the Earth within the hour. You shouldn't notice much other than an aurora. Which leads me to my second point. The phenomenon of coloured lights that first appeared in the skies of many parts of the world only 48 hours ago. This rare spectacle aurora, usually witnessed by those living in high latitudes, has captivated so many of us with its beauty. However, I can report the cause of this wonder was a G5 level solar storm capable of considerable disruption to our modern way of life. Yet, aside from this illuminated display, very few incidents of damage were reported. That is because the storm was forecast and strategies put in place to protect ourselves. It was predicted, and we responded. Due to the positive actions taken by governments and industry, most of you will have only experienced minor effects of this storm, such as small navigation errors on your GPS devices or a temporary loss of cell phone signal. A few satellites, some of them more than 2 decades old, were permanently taken offline. But such an eventuality was planned for, and backup satellites were brought into service. On the ground, a few transformers in North America were lost, which brought about blackouts in the cities of New York, Boston, Montreal, and Toronto. However, power was restored within the hour. Had we not had mitigation strategy for extreme weather, space weather in place, the effects could have been much worse, perhaps even leading to catastrophic outcomes. While many of us in the developed world have had the capability and economic capacity to prepare for the impact of solar storms by hardening our grids and preparing our society for the impacts, we realize that many in the developing world will be hit the hardest by the next approaching solar storm. We will stand ready and able to help the citizens of the world through this time, and we have made preparations to aid any nation who requests assistance through their recovery. Actions that were taken years ago to inform the public about the hazards of space weather led to a global movement of interest and concern in a potential natural disaster situation that previously had very little awareness. Infused with new knowledge, communities around the world petitioned its leaders to take action and safeguard its citizens against solar storms. This eventually led to policymakers and industry admitting their underestimation of the possible dangers of a severe solar storm, and they started taking steps to protect against it. Today, we may have seen the benefits to these actions firsthand. Now I'd like to turn to our invited experts so they can answer questions from the press. Yes.
Good morning, George Grosby from the Scientific American. Can you tell us how you were able to predict this event so precisely?
Thank you for your question. We have Dr. Kumar with us today. He is from the Indian Space Research Organization, and he'd be pleased to take that question. Dr. Kumar?
Thank you very much for the interesting question. I think by now you must be aware of this particular slide with the help of your awareness campaign, that it shows the interaction of the CMEs or solar flares and the magnetic fields. And you are also aware of the different level of the storms that happens and what are the precautions to be taken in that particular case. So I don't want to dwell much about these things. But I want to mention some of the things that happened over the last few years that led us to these wonderful, beautiful situations now, what are we facing now. So over the years, thanks to Dr. Salazar, HOCOMOCO constellations, we are having continuous, precise 3D magnetic field mapping of the sun. And with the improved understanding of our heliophysics and geomagnetic interactions, we are able to model that things into a particular precise model, and with the help of the supercomputers, quantum computers in the AIMS Research Laboratory, we are able to get faster and faster solutions, and we could bridge that difference between the observations and the predictions. We also have analyzed a lot of data from our Kepler missions that we have observed the star spots in the some of the stars, and those things led us to the new understanding of the physics in the solar system. So with all these things put together, we have got a total system with which we predicted the particular event in well advance to the precise level that we are expected to happen. So that's why people are very much aware of the things, and it went all fine, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Yes, the next question, please. Madam?
Good morning. Anja Schuster from Der Spiegel. My question is for Dr. Salazar from NASA. Could you please elaborate on NASA's scientific missions for heliophysics and how they have benefited our space weather understanding? Thank you.
Good morning. Well, as you know, heliophysics is one of NASA's top priorities. The agency has a demonstrated track record in scientific missions for such a purpose in the 70s. The same applies to ESA. In 2013, when SolarMAX brought more solar flares, CMEs, geomagnetic storms, and auroras than ever experienced before in quite some time, proper decisions were made at the highest level, and the proper actions were taken so we could be prepared for the next thing. So nowadays, thanks to the joint efforts and the strong commitment of the world's major space agencies, the International Space Weather Agency, where we are today, and representative bodies from the satellite industry, power industry that support the proposal from ISU, Team SolarMAX, the heliocentric orbit continuous monitoring constellation, HOCOMOCO, is fully operative. After 4 launches of 4 mini-satellites, each over the last 2 years, 16 mini-satellites of approximately 50 kilograms are now as close as 0.3 astronomical units to the Sun in 16 different 6-month periodic orbits, carrying appropriate payload, scientific payload, instruments such as magnetometers and radiometers, which allows to continuously map the solar wind and its characteristics thanks to the various inclinations and spin orientations of each spacecraft. Complementing the observations from other scientific probes such as Stereo, SOHO, and Kepler, we can study the solar wind, the interplanetary magnetic field, the CMEs, as well as offering data on spacecraft radiation resilience. And this enhanced monitoring system, as Dr. Kumar said, it constitutes a very effective tool, warning tool, against destructive solar weather, and this will be for the next 11 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salazar. The next question, please.
Good morning. Xian Xuyuan from China News. Are there any disruption on the society? Thank you.
That's an interesting question. That will be fielded by Dr. Martel.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, I can say that everything is under control thanks to our studies that inspired the International Space Weather Agency, created thanks to the great awareness campaign led by Team SolarMAX. After the worldwide success of the film, of the movie Solarpocalypse, the population understands what space weather is now and how to prepare for it. The disaster management plan has been really effective, and there is no problem with food and water supply. The population is very educated and so very calm.
Thank you, Dr. Martel. Yes, another question. Sir?
Timo Nikkanen from The Economist. Power and other utilities were restored in short order, yet the authorities say that this was worse than the storm in 1989. What is different this time?
Yes, thank you for your question. The 1989 event in North America, that caught us by surprise. However, forecasting and disaster management has advanced since then, and Jim Rosenkrantz from the power industry will take your next question.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I'm Jim Rosenkrantz. I'm here representing the Association of Electrical Distributors. On behalf of our constituent companies, we would like to inform our customers that we are nearly back to 100% and will achieve that before tomorrow morning. Fortunately, over the last few years, we have worked closely with our government partners, some of them right here at the table, and the general public to support the phased implementation of the robust smart grid. This is a concept that was implemented in North America and several European cities. It's created a large degree of system resilience in our distribution and storage networks for electricity. I'm reminded of a briefing given back in 2014 by a member of the International Space University at our annual Distributors Conference. I took a moment to look up their presentation this morning, and I thought it would be useful today. What you see above are the recommendations the SolarMAX group gave to our industry. I am also aware that this campaign was conducted in concert with public and policymaker campaigns, which helped unify our efforts. While the transition isn't complete yet to the robust smart grid, we expect the system to become even more resilient in coming decade. The hundreds of millions of dollars invested in North American and European infrastructure have surely saved us billions today. We appreciate the support of the public in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenkrantz. The next question, please.
Jamie Babb, National Post. I was hoping I could find out what policymakers did to avoid huge blackouts in this case.
Thank you for your question. We have with us today a member of the International Space Weather Agency, Mrs. LaRose.
Thank you. Good morning. After our terrible experience of Hydro-Quebec in 1999, which created a huge blackout in the electricity transmission system in Canada, the Canadian Member of Parliament decided to act together with our following colleagues. Consequently, we started to raise awareness, especially in the United States and Europe. Thanks to that, the International Space University dedicated a team project to solar events and the way we can mitigate the consequences during and after a solar storm. As mentioned before, the report increased awareness among policymakers, military, industry, and general public. So, as a result, at the national level, in Canada, we implemented the Distribution Resilience Act in order to protect our power grid, and as mentioned before by Mr. Rosenkrantz. And this act has been followed by other countries. And besides, at the international level, one of the most outstanding results of this report is the creation of the International Space Weather Agency, to which I belong and to which I contribute a lot. And finally, this agency published a few years ago the space weather mitigation guidelines that are now followed by most spacefaring nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. LaRose. We have time for more questions.
Yep.
Yes, sir?
Gabriele Brandi from the Financial Times. It seems that no harmful impact on state-based services was recorded. And Dr. Sarshut, how do you explain this? Thank you.
Good day. Thank you for your question. In 2014 and 2015, Team SolarMAX went to several professional conferences where the message reached many members of the World Satellite Association, to which I belong. The main point was about the broad range of implications solar storms can have on society and our members' business. In particular, operators and manufacturers later implemented the suggested strategies to make newer systems resilient to solar storms, including hardening, shielding, but also redundancies for single-point failures. Well, the overall cost was a few $100 million, but all operators paid them off since. First, thanks to the day-to-day cost savings regarding low-magnitude events. Second, by the little effects the recent storm had on infrastructures, especially since most of their hardware was preventively put into safe mode after receiving the space weather forecast alert. This conjunction of upstream and downstream countermeasures was truly efficient to protect their systems from this very event and ensure the quickest recovery possible. As a result, I can officially state that all our members are currently confident that the full portfolio of services will be restored in a few days, following proper checks. This includes communications, broadcast, positioning, navigation and timing, as well as coastal and ambient-like services. In the meantime, only minimum perturbations are expected, as no significant mobilization of assets for emergency government uses is forecast. Finally, The data collected by the space weather probes systematically installed on board the geosynchronous satellites launched since 2016 will be made available to the ISWA database in a couple of hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Starshoot. Are there any questions on topics not yet addressed? Perhaps maybe a question from social media sites. Yes.
Good morning, Chunhui Wang from Space News. Many of our Twitter followers want to know how do the astronauts from Inspiration Mars feel after the storm? Thank you.
Hi, thanks for the concern. We at Inspiration Mars are pleased to inform you that our astronauts, Chris Hadmeadow and Hirohito Sanada, though directly in the path of the coronal mass ejection, have actually been little affected by the event. With the recently developed forecasting capabilities we've developed with our friends at NASA, the HOCOMOCO system, we were able to warn them of the event several days ago. Our active radiation shielding technology, used in combination with a unique tailoring of the interior architecture of our spacecraft to mitigate against such events, a methodology actually put forward by this SolarMAX group that we keep on talking about, has significantly reduced the acute dosage both Chris and Hirohito received. This redistribution of the spacecraft architecture has also saved some more sensitive hardware we have on board. Taking into account ergonomic and safety constraints, designing away from a purely conventional layout towards a layout optimized for the particular radiation profile attributed with the trajectory of our Inspiration Mars mission, we were able to reduce the total dosage of our astronauts just through the redistribution of the architecture by 37% without adding any additional weight. This allowed us to use a lighter, less power-hungry system for active shielding. Chris and Hirohito conducted their first EVA about 11 hours ago and have confirmed everything is A-OK. Our astronauts are in good spirits. Hirohito got a stunning photo of the event on impact, and Chris has just about finished a cover of Cream's Sunshine of Your Love. A combination of antioxidants and dietary supplements over the coming months will minimize any long-term damage we expect, several decades down the line, maybe. Just be on the safe side. But we really shouldn't take this event lightly. Space is the next frontier for humanity to explore, and it is very much fraught with hostility. Nature is indifferent to us, and will always be more subtle, more intricate, and will have far greater imagination than us. She'll never let us relax.
This is very good news. Please send my best wishes to them. Thank you. Is there another question?
Yes, I have a question. I'm Melissa Battler from CNN. Can you comment on any future or possible long-term effects of this or an even larger solar storm?
Thank you. Yes, actually, one of our panel experts is a futurist, but he's not with us today in person. But he is joining us live on WebEx, I believe. We got him?
Okay,
Jim.
well, as you know, I'm a futurist, and my job is to try to help people anticipate events that are sometimes considered to be pretty unlucky and impossible. But in this case, we were lucky. We were able, through a group of people at the International Space University, to prepare for the SolarMAX, that event that happened recently. And so it wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been. Now, of course, we know from history that these events do happen on a catastrophic level, on a global level. And so while that was not what happened this most recent time, because of our preparations, we need to make sure that we're not lulled into complacency. The sun is our friend, but like any friend, it can often be threatening and do strange things. So keep the vigilance up, keep the preparation up, and be prepared for the big event when it happens next time.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed that the Carrington level solar event that we've been tracking is about to hit us. But don't worry, we are prepared. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're in an affected area, please follow your guidelines set out by your respective nations in your Space Weather Survival Guide. For those of you watching in parts of the world where it's currently night, please go out and enjoy the aurora.
You've now seen two possible futures for humanity. Which one will come to pass? Will society heed the warnings of Team SolarMAX? That choice is up to all of us.
I'd like the rest of my team to join me on stage for questions.
As Richard said, we would be happy to field any and all questions at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations for this extremely innovative and original presentation of the project. I mean, it's I'm very impressed this way you have presented this project. I think what I found is really you with this, even with this presentation, which as I said is not classical, all the messages are clear. I mean, in terms of international cooperations between space agencies, in terms of scientific research on solar physics, public awareness, etc. You provide also a very complete and comprehensive review of damages and impact of these solar events. I don't have any questions because it's, as I said, it's comprehensive. You have focused on basically all the key points. I would have maybe expected a bit more. Being a scientist, I would have expected a bit more details on solar physics on the stage of understanding today. It has been covered by Dr. Kummer in a way, but I would have expected maybe more information on this. For instance, when you talk about prediction of solar storms, with what kind of time delay and accuracies, etc. You know, what about false alerts or whatever? So, but these are really, I would say, minor comments. In general, I feel very impressed by your presentation and your work. Congratulations.
Thank you. In terms of the specific issues that you mentioned with regards to the prediction times and the false positives, I'd like to hand over to Paul and Jamie. Jamie's our solar physics expert, and Paul is in charge of helping to come up with the satellite constellation concept, so I'll hand over to them.
Well, first of all, with regards to predicting solar storms, the main restraint is that the sun, of course, is an enormous seething ball of superheated plasma, and it turns out that magnetohydrodynamics aren't actually the easiest thing to simulate in a computer. So in terms of detailed simulations, we need to have better data on how the solar magnetic field actually behaves, and there are many gaps, mostly due to lack of direct observation thereof. If you want to talk about.
The only thing I'd like to add to that is it's hard to know exactly if a solar storm would impact Earth. And since the plasma travels along the magnetic field lines, the HOCOMOCO constellation tries to, among other things, map the magnetic field lines. And if you can accurately map where the magnetic field lines are, you can predict if a solar storm happens if a solar event happens at a particular place on the sun, you can say whether or not it'll hit Earth. So in terms of actual timing, I'm not sure if we went into too much detail as to how long it would take the solar storm to get us. We were more interested in knowing if the solar event would impact Earth or if Earth was safe.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I have to echo the comments of my friend. This was a very nice awareness effort. I would even recommend you to cut and paste out of it, because this could be an excellent tool to put on a YouTube or something like that to create awareness, because I think most of the people do not even know what it is. I raised one question which I had not answered, which has always been a little bit on my mind. You give 5 categories of solar storms, G1 to G5, and then you put X Carrington. Yeah? I have a nearly triple question on that one, but all linked to each other. How strong was Carrington? How do we know how strong was Carrington? I know we've been burning some cores on the poles to try to measure indirectly how Carrington was, but there's a lot of question about that, if that was right. And if we assume a Carrington or a worse than Carrington, what will survive? Will the GPS system survive? To give you one example, because we're talking about the survival of the 2 astronauts, which coming from the astronaut world, I appreciate your concern, but for instance, the GPS, which are hardened, do they survive something like 1.5 times Carrington? So how do we measure Carrington? Do we know how strong it was? And what will be the effects of something even stronger than Carrington?
Okay, I'll answer the how do we measure the Carrington in sort of 2 parts. We have both, as you mentioned, the historical data from which we are trying to imply the effects of Carrington and try and gain some measurements that way. We also have, in the future, access to the Kepler data set, which we can further explore and try and see if there have been other Carrington level events that we can observe through that data set. Yep, that's all you wanted to cover. Thank you. Yeah, so we have proposals and ideas for future work where we could look into that data set with the help of our colleagues at NASA, and then to see if we can more accurately determine the level of that event and the effect on our systems based on that data set as well. Thanks.
So in your feeling, does Carrington, like some people say, knock out 80% of the GPS?
Should George? Paul, sorry.
I would like to just say that one of the major problems with these spacecraft upsets are there's different types of damage. So one is displacement damage, and typically what happens is solar panel performance is severely degraded. And so even if you don't kill the computer, the spacecraft lifetime will significantly decrease. Another thing that you see is spacecraft charging. So a lot of work currently goes into harness design and ground design, but for something that will charge your spacecraft to such a degree, I think that you're going to come up with major issues in the electrical system. The other thing is single event upsets and bit flips, and I think that you'll definitely run into problems with like command control and those issues.
Thank you very much, and again, my congratulations for a very entertaining but still very interesting presentation, and I think you made a very good balance between the two, so thank you very much.
Well, can I say that it's a great mix of fact and fun. It was really, really good. A question arises about, okay, in your apocalyptic scenario, SOHO, I was pleased to see, would be still working, 22 years old at that stage, but you showed a mission timeline for upcoming heliospheric missions. There still seem to be gaps there. You talked about microsatellites helping out. You showed Solar Orbiter, Swarm. They're not going to do that much in terms of monitoring. Shouldn't we have another SOHO?
Ideally, we would have another SOHO, but we are facing incredible budgetary pressures in I guess both space agencies in the US and worldwide, which is why we made the decision to focus on one specific solution, which would be microsatellite based and hopefully more affordable than, say, a large SOHO type mission. I mean, we are still advocating for these types of missions, and we do believe that they are important. But in terms of getting a specific implementable outcome from this project, we felt that our efforts were best based on something more affordable to fill the knowledge gap that we also know exists. But we do recognise that those missions are coming to their end of life and will need to be replaced. So that's something we're advocating for.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, and I have to say the first half hour was about the most depressing thing I've sat through in a while. But you pulled it off, great acting, I really appreciate that, and I echo the comments of my colleagues that it's a great combination of fun and fact being presented. I would say that probably the last thing we'd want to have is another cheesy Hollywood movie about, you know, solar apocalypse or whatever. You know, all that said, how would you propose to go forward with a really strong, you know, campaign to get the word out? Because, I mean, this is going to be an issue. It's going to happen at some point, and you know, how do you propose really from this effort going forward with an awareness campaign?
Sure. I'll hand over to Remco, who basically led the drive for the awareness for us. Thanks.
Sure, thank you, Mark, and thank you for the question. What we've seen is indeed a very big lack of understanding, hence the format that we choose, hence also the format that we choose for our other products. The key one being our executive summary. We wrote our executive summary, and I hope that you will get the opportunity to see it very soon. We wrote that as really the first step towards a widespread awareness campaign among many stakeholders. In our report, we recognize 3 types of key stakeholders that we'd like to start informing together with other people that promote solar event awareness. To be informed as soon as possible, using the executive summary, using some of the products that we propose in there, that being the general public, first of all, the general public to understand what this is and to maybe put some pressure on other stakeholders to start taking actions, being policymakers, the military to some extent, and definitely different parts of the industry. Beginning with the power industry, as we've seen in our little role play here, that plays a very integral part, as the power industry holds the key to a whole knock-on effect that we've also seen here that may disrupt society. If we're able, through our network, through the ISU network, through our personal networks, to start reaching out, using these very simple instruments that we have developed by now, to get that ball rolling, that's really the intention that we had with this project. Thank you.
That was great. It was very original, very nice. It's an emotional thing to watch. Really enjoyed it. I actually have 2 questions. They shouldn't take too long. One thing was specific engineering. What do we know that we can do? You said smart grid, but what are the things, the actual things that would be done to harden the grids in the Western countries?
Sure, I'll hand over to George.
So we have to recognize that the smart grid, the infrastructure itself is very, very expensive, and to upgrade it in any significant, or to harden it in any significant way does only one thing: it protects it. However, if we emphasize, what we emphasized was a robust smart grid, which is not only places specific mitigation techniques tailored for ground-induced currents, it also improves the overall efficiency of the entire system. So in this way, you have efficiency all throughout the year, and if an event occurs, you have the specific measures in place to prevent something like cascading failure, something similar to Hydro-Quebec, in which one portion of the grid failed, causing subsequent failures all along the grid. This is really an effort to put in place a really practical solution in light of budgetary constraints that we can understand the power distribution industry must be under.
And then my follow-up question is, now that you've been part of SolarMAX, are you scared?
Absolutely. But we have seen that there are steps that we can take to reduce this risk, and I'm really excited about getting out there, going back home and sort of bringing this message to the people who can actually implement this. I mean, Personally, in 2 weeks, we have my agency has a meeting with the Space Policy Unit in the Australian government, and absolutely, I'll try to bring this up.
Great. Well, I think we should thank Team SolarMAX for their presentation.